Hey everyone, JayArr here from the Bell of Lost Souls, and today we are taking a look at the AD&D Dungeoneer Survival Guide. This is an essential source book that provides players and DM alike with innovative rules and settings for underground adventures. It's basically the first edition guide to the Underdark, to the Underground, to mazes and mysteries, and mines and monsters. We will take a look at this inside. It is a one of two different survival guides. There's also the Wilderness Survival Guide, and these are books that help players and DMs alike deal with underground adventures. If you're a player, it has everything you need to know about the Underdark, the hazards you can expect, the different ways you'll interact with the world, and it talks about some of the, of course, rewards you'll get out of exploring it. If you are a dungeon master, then you have your own section with its own special table of contents later on in the book, because it's separate from the players, and no one just kind of leafing through it in a game store back in 1986 needs to know what the DMs are getting into. It's so mysterious. And it's actually really cool. I love this section because it tells you a lot about how to make a campaign, not just underground, but it's got some great advice in general. But we'll get to that in a minute. For now, let's go through the player section of the Dungeoneer Survival Guide. So, Dungeoneering. What is it? In D&D terms, it's adventuring underground. It's got rules for underground play. It talks to you about the underground campaign and the various denizens of the Underdark and other underground locales. As you might expect, there's a lot of under stuff under the auspices of the Dungeoneer Survival Guide. It gives you kind of a visual layout of what an underground adventure might look like and the places it might take you. It talks to you about the kinds of movement that you'll have to get through it. Swimming, climbing, tying yourself off with ropes. And these rules go more in depth than they had in the player's guide. As you can see in the climbing section, they talk about the climbing success rates for non-thieves. They talked about how encumbrance might affect you, the different kinds of surfaces you'll climb across. And then we get into things like how do you use the climbing tools and how does that affect your chance of success. What do you do with grappling hooks? What do you do if you're using a rope to cross a chasm? Well, what is a belay and how can that help you avoid falling to your doom? Which is a repeated theme in the underground adventures. There are places, plenty of places where you could fall to your doom, and so you need to know how to stop a fall. Or when you come to a very tight space, how to squeeze through and how to dig your way out of rubble, and of course, as you do that, how to deal with the fatigue and exhaustion of it. It gives you a lot of the hazards of it and then tells you how you, as a player, might deal with some of the things here, including taking along a bunch of NPCs to be helpful, to help you, like, hold torches, to light the way, to fight things, and of course, this being first edition, there's obviously a loyalty table, rules for your henchmen panicking, trying to betray you and kill you, sneak away, or run, or be just frozen stock still like a statue until you take them out into the surface world. As you might expect, the combat chapter is fairly in-depth as well. They talk about how the fighting underground is different. You have to deal with cave-ins, you have to deal with noxious gases, you have to worry about fighting on bridges and ledges, and again, you might be pushed to your doom, depending on which way you're facing when you're getting hit by arrows. It might determine the likelihood of you falling off of the side of a cliff, for instance, if that's where you're fighting. But what I like about this, even though it is kind of deadlier rules, what I like about it is it shows you the kind of danger and excitement that you're expected to face when you go underground. It makes the prospect of underground adventuring seem dangerous, yes, but also exciting. It's a chance to encounter things that are outside of the norm, even for adventuring in like a safe, dungeon, which is arguably more civilized, because you've got, worked stone and you've got doors and it's a place that someone built, whereas this is the underground wilderness. And as you can see, there's, rules for rivers, rules for underground flood, rules for being swept away off your feet, and all of that is worth it because if you're successful, there's plenty of wealth to be had in the Underdark, and one of the best ways to do it is to start your own mine. Yep, that's right, this is first edition, and of course they've got rules for mines. I love this. It tells you what kind of veins you might find, and it's got rules for where the veins go. It's got rules for whether or not you've got mithril in there, whether or not you've got gemstones in there, what kind of gemstones, what quality of ore you have, depending. There are let's see, in the mining section, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different tables in the first 2 pages. 7 different tables in the whole section, and it's all to help you figure out how much wealth you can pull out of your own mine once you've made a claim. That's just sort of one of the things you're expected to do once you get down there. And here's the Hireling loyalty table. Here's where they talk about, like, well, maybe they'll steal the diamonds instead. Maybe they might betray you. You have to hire the right kind of hirelings, and if you don't treat them well, they're just going to run off with everything. We've got new equipment, of course, available to people wanting to go underneath the world into the Underdark. Grappling hooks, air bladders, things like that to help you, navigate and not suffocate to death. And a really neat section right before we get to the Dungeon Master section is this part on improving play. It talks about planning an expedition and kind of lays out like things you might want to do to be a successful party to plan an expedition. So you might send some scouts out to try and gather information. It talks about hirelings that you might have, boats that you might have, ways that you can fight effectively underground. It's got a low-key tactics section in here where it talks about creating diversions or ways to fight effectively and to have some sophisticated plannings. Because, again, if you're underground, things are deadlier. Things are darker, literally, and ways that they can use that to their advantage are helpful things for any party to have. I love this section on creative underground spell use where it talks about ways that you might get more mileage out of your spells because you're going to be underground, you need it. Now, let's get to the Dungeon Master section. This section is pretty fantastic. So it lays out the underground environment and talks about like the different features that you'll want to have, and it talks about the nature of the underground and its denizens. But what I really love about it is this section on what the Underdark is and how it sort of fits into your world. It gives you a bunch of different theories that talk about how it works. So one theory is that there's a hollow inner earth. Basically, once you go down deep enough, it's all one Underdark and it connects everywhere in the world. The Swiss cheese theory says that the world is networked with tunnels and chasms that run from basically anywhere in the world to the other if you have the right map, but they don't go to, like down to the core of the world. And then the least imaginative and so the most likely correct one is there are isolated pockets of Underdark realms all throughout the place, or that finally they give you the partial connection theory, which is the most common theory, which says that there are a lot of connections in the different underground realms, but they're not all interconnected. There's no uniform thing. There's like the expected magma and mantle and core at the bottom, just like a normal planet. Anyway, I like that because it kind of tells you, like, if you're making an underground campaign, this is the stuff you need to think about. You need to think about what are the creatures down there, how is the world set up, and it kind of gives you one sample campaign setting, the Lands of Deep Earth. It's very, very well laid out, as you can see here. It's got 4 different levels to start with, and there are plenty more, and these are huge areas, by the way. It has just a sample, like, here's one region of the Underdark, and it's got everything from, what the caverns are near the surface to a deep fungus forest, complete with a sunken swamp, a lithid outpost, you have hobgoblins, you have Kuotoa, you have a lower underground lake, and that's got its own, like, aquatic creatures. It's got chambers of fire. It's got a lava level. The lava caves are just a hellacious place for anyone to be. And then, of course, you run into things like the deep gnomes, the Duergar, the drow. It's basically a very well fleshed out realm. And it is a great template for anyone looking to build an underground campaign or an underground world. But what I love is this part that's the campaign considerations. So This is honestly one of the better guides that I've seen in a D&D book for things you'll want to keep in mind. It has a lot of common advice, things like know the types of players you have. You have your adventurers, your problem solvers, your role players, that sort of thing. But it also goes into depth on like what it actually takes as a DM. Like, you're gonna have to juggle like the different types of players you have, and you're gonna have to deal with handling their needs. You might have one person who wants a lot of story components. You might have one person who wants exciting combats, and it kind of talks a little bit about striking that balance. And it also talks about how important the setting is. Your unique setting, your campaign world, is what's going to draw the characters in. And it tells you that you want to have a lot of detail, and it talks about different ways to build interest and to lure people in, which sounds maybe a little bit hazy, but to draw your players in and to invite them to suspend their disbelief and venture into this world with you, which is really cool. It's got some great tips for building your own world, including like internal consistency, how to handle variety without being like just a scattershot kind of thing, how to handle intelligent races, and what kinds of things make your world unique. And then right after that, it has the plot and counterplot, the importance of story. It talks about how just as important as your setting is the story that you tell in the campaign. In fact, the story may be the most important element in any campaign, which is a kind of the philosophy I use when I run my own games. The DM's role is basically that of a storyteller, according to this section, and it really resonated with me when I read this, because it talks about how you want to develop the plot, but you want to develop it to encourage the participation and proactive actions of your players. You want to get them to act as a team. It talks about how and why you want to use combat, and how and why you want to use role-playing encounters, and how to build towards a climax, and what to do afterwards. And then it talks about juggling multiple storylines at once, and what are the different elements of a good story. And it breaks them down very simplistically as well. When it talks about foreshadowing, it doesn't mean like, you know, sowing a hint that Darth Vader is Luke's father early on. It just means if there's a trap, there might be a sign there that says, beware of the chamber of the black hole, you know, just to indicate that you've got a trap coming up. And then, of course, it talks about rewards. And this I feel like could be a much larger section all its own. But of course, it talks about the different kinds of rewards that players can find, and things that aren't necessarily found on the table. So, of course, you've got magic items, wealth, and XP, right? But it also talks about gratitude. So one of the things that an adventure might yield is the friendship or gratitude of NPCs or communities that your players are connected to. A debt of gratitude, for instance, might be a favor from the king that they can call on later. It could even be something like a beggar or a barmaid returning with, returning the favor or a kindness someday, offering them up something that just makes them feel good about being a hero. It also talks about discoveries. Information can be an extremely effective reward for characters that are interested in what is beyond the monster in the next room in your world. Even if all they want to know is when are we going to fight next, knowing, hey, there's a manticore down the hall is a reward in and of itself. And the more important the story is to your players, the more meaningful information becomes as a reward to your players. And so it talks about looking for ways to encourage that, as well as a sense of accomplishment, the world changing as a result to the things. And it talks about different ways that you can present your story and your campaign. It's got the open campaign, which is the what are the players going to do? It's basically the what do you want to do? Then it's got the matrix campaign, which is the DM sort of sets up this like matrix of events that are happening, and the players take actions based on it. But then, as they run through like different chains of events and collapse storylines, it heads towards its inevitable climax. And then, of course, it talks about like things you'll want to do, very practical things you'll want to do, like how to prepare for running an adventure, how to help players roll up characters, and how to get them to help you provide ideas for adventures, and how to get them to help you handle everything. And then it's got a cool section on like drawing maps and using multiple different layers of terrain, and it goes fairly in depth into that, but we're not gonna focus quite so much on that. That is the Dungeoneer's Survival Guide. It is a fantastic book. It's first edition, so you're probably not using it if you're watching this, but it's got some stuff that's definitely worth checking out, even if you're playing, 5th edition, 3rd edition, Pathfinder, whatever. If you like role-playing games, this is a pretty cool book to check out. Anyway, that is enough for now. I'm JayArr. This has been the AD&D Dungeoneer Survival Guide. I'm from Battle of Lost Souls. Thanks for watching.
Click to subscribe. Check out more videos. And thanks for watching.